Okay, so we are going to look at lesson 13, which is graphing the standard form. So just a reminder, the standard form of a quadratic equation, just on here, standard form has x squared. And then if we have to change standard form to factored form, we see the two factors here. So if I have x squared, and I have to write that as two factors, this would be x times x. So we converted standard form to factored form. And if I have factored form and I have to convert back to standard form, we would use the distribution property. So x times x makes x squared. And x times 9, we would add 9x. For those of you that are area model people, we could break our rectangle into two pieces, x and then x and 9. X times x makes x squared, and 9 times x makes 9x. And then looking at the individual pieces, we could multiply that as well. In factoring out x squared and 18, I notice first in the two terms here, I can't factor out a number. However, I can factor out an x from x squared and from negative 18x. So if I factor an x out of x squared, it would be x times, and taking an x away, it would be x, and then minus in the middle. And if I factor an x out of 18x, I'm left with 18. Same thing here. If I go from factored form back to standard form, distributing 6 times x makes 6x. My minus sign goes in the middle, and x times x makes x squared. And then down here, if I factor an x out, we would have x times, and then if I take an x out of negative x squared, it would be negative x. And then taking x away from the plus 10, x would be plus 10. And then for the last one, distributing negative x times x is negative x squared. And then negative x times positive 2.75 would make minus 2.75, and then putting the x on the end. And looking at the second one, how do the quadratic expressions in each column, what do they have in common? Besides everything in the left column is in standard form and everything else is in factored form, be prepared to share. So these, it has x squared. And then here, this all has x times x. So now we're going to look at what is the effect of the linear term. So here, ladies and gentlemen, if we have x squared plus 6x, what we're going to do is factor that. So we're going to factor this to find the x-intercepts. So x squared plus 6x, if I factor the x out, it's going to be x times x plus 6. And then to find the x-intercepts, we'd set both equations equal to 0. So x equals 0 and x plus 6 equals 0. In solving both equations, subtract 6 from both sides, and you would get x equals negative 6. So our two x-intercepts would be x equals 0 and x equals negative 6. So now to find the average of those x-intercepts, we would just add 0 plus negative 6 together and then divide by 2. So 0 plus negative 6 is negative 6 over 2, and that gives us negative 3. So the x-coordinate of the vertex is negative 3. And then if I wanted to solve for y, what we would do is substitute negative 3 in here for x. So then y would equal negative 3 squared plus 6 times negative 3. And then to get the y-coordinate of the vertex, We can use a calculator there. So in doing that, -3 squared plus 6 times -3 gives me -9. So now same thing over here. We're going to solve and we're going to factor first x squared minus 10x. And in factoring that, we're going to get x times x minus 10. And then we're going to set that equal to 0 to get my x-intercepts. So I'd set both parts equal to 0. So x equals 0 and x minus 10 equals 0. Adding 10 to both sides of this equation, we would get x equals 10. So my two answers would be x equals 0 and x equals 10. Sorry, that's a sloppy 10. And then to find the average, 0 plus 10 is 10 over 2 is going to give me 5. So the x coordinate is 5. And then substituting back in 5 into the equation, we would go y is equal to, so putting 5 in, it would be 5 squared minus 10 times 5, which is 25 minus 50, which gives us -25. You can also use a calculator. And then again, we're going to complete the same process and factor. So y is equal to -x squared plus 50x. I'm going to factor out an x. So x times -x plus 50. And then we're going to set that equal to 0 because that's where y equals 0 is going to give me my x-intercepts. So we're going to go x equals 0 and -x plus 50 equals 0, which then gives us, if I subtract 50 over, and I'm going to get -x equals -50. We could divide both sides by -1, and then that gives us x equals 50. So our two x-intercepts are x equals 0 and x equals 50. And then the average, 0 plus 50 is going to be 50 over 2, gives us x equals 25. And then just substituting that in. So I'm going to put negative and then parentheses around the 25 squared plus 50 times 25. And then that gives me 625. And I'm going to leave the last one for you. So some quadratic expressions have no linear terms. Find the x-intercept and the x-coordinate of the vertex of the graphs representing it. We just did that. So moving on. We're going to figure this out. And we're going to come up with the two forms of this equation. So first, in standard form, we can see that this equation is just our regular parabola of y equals x squared. And then we're also going to convert that into factored form, which if I change y equals x squared into factored form, that would give us y equals x times x. Now, this one's a little bit different. So what I'm going to do is put this in factored form by using the x-intercepts. So if I know that x is equal to -3, that's my 0, and x is equal to 3, what I'm going to do is work backwards to figure out, well, what did I multiply together to get that? So what I'm going to do is add 3 to both sides. And I have here x plus 3 equals 0 is the linear equation that I'm going to multiply by this one to get my equation in factored form. So over here, I'm going to subtract the 3, and we're going to have x minus 3 equals 0. So my two equations that I multiply together in factored form is y equals x plus 3 times x plus 3, or x minus 3, I'm sorry. So what we're going to do now is take that equation in factored form and distribute it to get standard form. So y is going to equal x times x gives us x squared. X times negative 3 would be minus 3x. Positive 3 times x would be plus 3x. And then positive 3 times negative 3 would be minus 9. We could see that those two are going to cancel out, and you get y equals x squared minus 9. So doing that process one last time, we could say here x equals negative 2. Adding the 2 to the other side gives us x plus 2 equals 0. And then here, x equals 3. Moving the 3 to the other side gives us x minus 3 equals 0. Multiplying these two equations on the left gives us factored form y equals x plus 2 times x minus 3. And then to get the standard form of our equation, we distribute. So y equals x squared. And then x times negative 3 gives us minus 3x. 2 times x gives us plus 2x. And then 2 times negative 3 gives us minus 6. Combining our like terms, we get y equals x squared minus 1x or minus x minus 6. So this would be our final equation in standard form. I'm now going to have you guys complete the rest of the lesson on your own.